The Roman Empire, a name that echoes through history as the ultimate symbol of power and conquest. Their legions marched across continents, bringing vast territories under the eagle's standard. But did you know there were lands even the mighty Romans could never conquer? Places that stopped the world's greatest war machine dead in its tracks. Let's start with the misty dark forests of Germania. In 09 AD, 3 entire Roman legions marched into the Teutoburg forest, led by Publius Quinctilius Varus. They were ambushed by an alliance of Germanic tribes led by Arminius, a man who had been raised in Rome and knew their tactics inside and out. The result was a massacre. Nearly 20,000 Roman soldiers were lost in what became known as Rome's greatest single defeat. The Romans tried again and again, but Germania's dense woods and fierce warriors proved to be an unbreakable barrier. The Rhine River would forever mark the edge of their empire in the north. Now let's head north to the rugged highlands of what we now call Scotland. The Romans called it Caledonia, a land of fierce, painted warriors known as the Picts. The Romans pushed north, winning battles but never the war. The resistance was so relentless and the terrain so unforgiving that Emperor Hadrian decided enough was enough. He built a massive wall, Hadrian's Wall, a 73-mile-long stone testament to the limits of Roman power. It wasn't just a fortification. It was an admission that Caledonia and its people were simply unconquerable. To the east, Rome faced its most formidable and enduring rival, the Persian Empire, first under the Parthians, and later the Sassanids. This wasn't a fight against scattered tribes. This was a clash of superpowers. For centuries, Rome and Persia were locked in a cycle of brutal wars. Cities were captured and recaptured, fortunes were won and lost, but neither side could ever deliver a knockout blow. Persia was a sophisticated, organized empire that matched Rome in military might and strategic brilliance, proving to be an equal, not a subject. Finally, there were the vast, punishing landscapes of the Arabian deserts and the interior of Africa. The Romans were masters of logistics, but even they couldn't overcome the sheer hostility of these environments. The scorching heat, lack of water, and endless sands made large-scale military campaigns almost impossible. These lands held little strategic value or resources worth the incredible cost of conquering them. The natural world itself became an impenetrable fortress. So, from the dark forests of Germania to the highlands of Scotland, the powerful Persian plains and the unforgiving deserts, we see that even the greatest empires have their limits. The story of Rome isn't just about its conquests, but also about the places that stood firm, reminding us that geography, fierce resistance, and the unconquerable spirit of people can defy even the mightiest of powers. Imagine the Roman Empire at its peak, an unstoppable force conquering everything in its path. But what if I told you about a single battle that shattered this empire, yes, spirit, and forever changed the course of its history? This isn't just another skirmish. This is the story of the day Rome learned to fear the forests. The year is 09 AD. 3 of Rome's finest legions, the 17th, 18th, and 19th, are marching through a dense, dark German forest known as Teutoburg. They are led by Publius Quinctilius Varus, a governor confident in Rome's might. But they are walking straight into a trap, a meticulously planned ambush orchestrated by a man they thought was their ally. His name was Arminius, a Germanic chieftain who had served in the Roman army, learned its tactics, and was now ready to use that knowledge against his former masters. For 3 agonizing days, the forest became a living nightmare. The Germanic tribes, perfectly at home in the treacherous terrain, launched relentless hit-and-run attacks. The Romans, weighed down by heavy armor and long supply trains, were completely outmaneuvered. The narrow forest paths neutralized their famous battle formations, turning their strength into a fatal weakness. Rain turned the ground into a muddy quagmire, making every step a struggle. The disciplined legions, the pride of the empire, were slowly and brutally dismantled. In the end, almost no one escaped. 20,000 of Rome's best soldiers were wiped out in one of the most devastating defeats the empire had ever suffered. The legion's sacred eagle standards, symbols of their honor and power, were captured by the tribes. When news of the disaster reached Rome, the city was plunged into panic and mourning. The mighty Emperor Augustus, now an old man, was reportedly so devastated that he would wander the halls of his palace, banging his head against the walls, crying out in anguish, "Quinctilius Varus, give me back my legions!" The loss was so profound, so psychologically damaging, that the numbers of the lost legions 17, 18 and 19 were never used again. The Battle of Teutoburg Forest was more than just a military defeat. It was a turning point. It marked the end of Rome's ambitious expansion east of the Rhine River. The dream of conquering all of Germania died in that dark forest. From that day forward, the Roman strategy shifted from relentless conquest to cautious defense. They built massive fortifications along the Rhine, accepting it as the permanent frontier of their empire. This one battle instilled a deep-seated fear of the barbarian lands, shaping Roman foreign policy for centuries to come. It proved that even the greatest empire on earth had its limits, and that sometimes the will to be free is a weapon more powerful than any sword. For 7 long centuries, two titans clashed, shaping the ancient world. Rome, the unstoppable force, met Persia, the immovable object. This wasn't a story of swift conquest, but of an endless grinding war where neither side could ever claim ultimate victory. This is the story of Rome's greatest rival. Think of Rome, and you picture disciplined legions marching across continents, conquering everything in their path. But in the east, they met their match. The first great shock came at the Battle of Carrhae. The overconfident Roman general, Crassus, one of the richest men in Rome, marched his legions deep into Parthian territory, expecting an easy win. He was disastrously wrong. Instead of a pitched battle, the Romans were met with a storm of arrows. The Parthian horse archers, masters of hit-and-run tactics, swarmed the slow-moving Roman squares. They'd ride in, unleash a volley of deadly arrows, and then retreat before the legions could respond. It was a nightmare. The Parthians even had camels loaded with spare arrows, ensuring the storm never ceased. Crassus's army was annihilated, and he was killed. To add insult to injury, the Parthians captured the Roman legionary standards, the sacred eagles. For Rome, this was the ultimate humiliation, a symbol of a defeat they would never forget. Centuries passed. The Parthians were eventually replaced by the powerful Sassanid Empire, but the dynamic remained the same. Emperors like Trajan and Julian the Apostate launched massive invasions, some even reaching the Persian capital, but they could never hold their gains. The Sassanids, in turn, pushed back, sometimes capturing entire Roman armies, as happened to the Emperor Valerian. These wars were incredibly costly, draining both empires of money and manpower. Great cities were sacked and vast territories were ravaged, but the border barely moved. Every victory was temporary, every defeat a lesson in resilience. While Rome conquered Gauls, Egyptians, and Britons, Persia always stood apart and equal, a mirror image of Roman power and ambition. They were the one empire Rome could never truly defeat, a testament to the fact that even the mightiest power has its limits. Ever wonder why the mighty Roman Empire, with its unstoppable legions, didn't just conquer the entire world? It wasn't always another army that stopped them. Sometimes it was the world itself. Think about it. To the south, the vast, unforgiving Sahara Desert. To the east, the endless Arabian sands. For an army that marched on its stomach and relied on well-built roads, these were death traps. No water, no food, no way to supply a legion. The desert was a silent, patient enemy that Rome could never defeat. Then there were the mountains. The towering Alps were a constant challenge, but beyond them lay the even more formidable Caucasus, and further east the Himalayas. Imagine trying to move tens of thousands of soldiers, their heavy gear, and supply wagons through those treacherous, freezing passes. It was a logistical nightmare, a natural fortress that dwarfed any wall humans could build. And what about the seas? Rome had a powerful navy, sure, but it was essentially a coastal force designed for the relatively calm Mediterranean. The wild, unpredictable Atlantic Ocean was a different beast entirely. They lacked the ships and navigation skills for long-range voyages, making faraway lands across the ocean completely unreachable. The horizon itself became a border. Finally, even when they could march, the environment fought back. Pushing into dense northern forests, or south into tropical jungles and swamps meant facing enemies deadlier than any warrior, disease. Malaria, dysentery, and other illnesses thrived in these climates, decimating Roman soldiers who had no natural immunity. The land itself was toxic to them. So, while we remember the great battles and famous generals, let's not forget the silent defenders that stood against Rome. The deserts, the mountains, the oceans, and the very climate of the lands they sought to conquer. These were the natural borders that proved, ultimately, that even the greatest empire has its limits. What if the Roman Empire never fell? What if it just kept expanding? Imagine, for a moment, a world where Roman legions didn't stop at the Rhine or the sands of Parthia. Picture Roman galleons, not Spanish caravels, landing on the shores of the Americas. Imagine Roman merchants trading directly in the bustling ports of ancient China, bringing silk and spices back along a global Appian way. This wouldn't just be a bigger empire. It would be a completely different world. One language, Latin, spoken from the Andes to the Himalayas. One set of laws, Roman law, governing every city on every continent. A single, unified global culture under the watchful eye of the Eagle Standard. Sounds incredible, right? A world without borders, united under one banner. It's the ultimate dream of order and civilization, but would this global Rome have lasted? History tells us that even the mightiest empires have a breaking point. The very things that plagued the historical Roman Empire would be magnified on a global scale. How could a single emperor in Rome effectively govern a province in what we know as Australia? The distances would be immense, communication impossibly slow. Rebellions would inevitably spark in these far-flung territories. Local cultures and identities, suppressed for centuries, would fight to re-emerge. Corruption, which already hollowed out the historical empire from within, would run rampant across a planet-spanning bureaucracy. The empire would become too vast, too complex, and too stretched to maintain its own weight. The collapse wouldn't just be the fall of an empire. It would be a global dark age, a worldwide fragmentation into chaos. And what would be the ultimate cost of this grand experiment? The price of total unity would have been the beautiful, messy, and vibrant tapestry of human diversity. Thousands of languages, cultures, traditions, and unique ways of seeing the world would have been erased, replaced by a single, monolithic Roman identity. All the art, philosophy, and innovation that grew from different civilizations would simply cease to exist. So as we look back, perhaps it's for the best that Rome never conquered the world. Its fall, though chaotic, allowed for the rise of new nations and new ideas, creating the rich and diverse world we know today. Maybe the greatest legacy of Rome isn't what it conquered, but what it left unconquered. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy exploring these what-if scenarios, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more dives into alternate history. See you next time.